I want to thank you again for attending our panel discussion on generative AI and the academic writing process. A quick disclaimer before we begin. Hundreds of you submitted questions in advance for this panel. Thank you so much. I did use Microsoft Copilot AI to assist in analyzing and synthesizing those questions to generate some of what we will be discussing today. So we appreciate everyone for submitting all of their questions, and we appreciate the assistance of AI for helping us analyze hundreds of them. My name is Andrea Bergella, and I am one of the higher education marketing managers here at APA. I will be moderating this session, and I am joined today by two members of our APA-style team, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with if you have attended previous APA-style sessions. We have Tim McAdoo and Chelsea Lee here, as well as a special guest from Oregon State. Liz Delf is a senior instructor in the School of Writing, Literature, and Film, as well as an AI faculty fellow for the Oregon State University Center for Teaching and Learning. Her current work focuses on AI literacy and adapting writing pedagogy for the AI era, emphasizing process over product and encouraging students to use AI as a thinking partner. She designs multimodal assignments such as comic strips, podcasts, and presentations that foster authentic learning and critical thinking while maintaining transparency about her own evolving relationship with AI tools. We're going to start today's session with a poll about how you're currently feeling about the presence of AI in academic writing. So please join us and select all that apply. We want to hear from you. The question is, how do you feel about the presence of AI in academic writing? We tried to select options that kind of run the spectrum from worried, excited, optimistic, confused, tired. My personal favorite is full of existential dread. So again, please tell us how you're feeling. Thank you everyone for responding. Do our panelists want to tell us how you feel about AI in academic writing? Which one applies to you the most?
I mean, it's complicated, optimistic, and also existential dread, all of the above.
We should have
Mm-hmm.
put it's complicated on the poll. That would have been a good poll answer.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
agreed.
I feel like sometimes I kind of rotate among how I feel. Like I'll have moments where I'll be really excited about it and I'm like, oh, it can do so many things. Let's investigate it. And then you see the shortcomings and you're like, ah, I'm kind of tired of it. Let me put it away for a little bit. And then you come back and you find something new. And I think it's like a refinement.
Yeah. Tim, does one stand out for you?
No, no, I agree. It is a mix for sure. Not
Yeah.
full of existential dread, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's see. The most common feeling that we are currently having is worry. Totally understandable, but there's a lot of optimism here,
So I
which we
think
love
Tim
to
nailed
see.
it. Tim nailed it. Cautiously optimistic is, or
Yeah,
or some other version related to that.
that's great. Well, thank you all for sharing your feelings. You can feel free to tell us more about how you're feeling in chat. We'd love to hear about it. We're going to kick it off with a question. Um, about navigating those feelings and changes. So, generative AI has significantly altered how students and instructors approach academic writing, often sparking strong emotions about the sudden ubiquity of AI. So, my question to the panel is, what guidance would you offer instructors for navigating these changes and addressing their impact in the classroom? Liz, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I mean, I think we're all figuring it out as we go. To me, that's one of the things that is both destabilizing and exciting. And so I think being open about that and honest about that with ourselves and our students, first and foremost. And also, I personally feel like we have to acknowledge the feelings and the stages of grief and the cautious optimism and the anger and whatever it is, right? Those things are all happening. We're all feeling that. And some of us I feel like maybe I've gone through some stages of grief over the last few years, right? My relationship to this stuff keeps evolving. But at this point, I feel like we do need to engage with it, right? The Digital Education Council says 86% of students are using AI for their coursework. So it's important for us as faculty members, as higher education professionals or administrators to do what we can to understand it, to talk with students and understand its strengths and its weaknesses and its risks and its challenges and the possibilities, right? That's the hopeful part. Um, that said, depending on where you stand with AI, engaging doesn't have to mean adopting, right? It doesn't mean you have to immediately incorporate all these tools in your own teaching, but just even having conversations with your students, having a clear AI policy, having a syllabus statement, that kind of stuff. We can and should be intentional and thoughtful about how we're using these tools and offering support and guidance to students. So to me, when we're thinking about boundaries and exploration, my own boundary as a faculty member is and I'm in writing, right? That's my field. So my boundary is that writing is a human-centered activity. It should remain human-centered. The humans need to stay in the loop and even more central than just in the loop. Um, and I think writing continues to be central and important and valuable for students as a mode of learning, as a mode of developing their critical thinking, as a mode of cognitive sharpening, right? As like an opposite of the cognitive offloading that we now are learning is happening when they use AI, when we all use AI. It's a way of building their expertise and developing their rhetorical judgment. But I also, myself, also feel like AI can be one tool as we continue to explore some stages of that process and learning and writing. So that's where I'm at, cautiously optimistic.
Tim, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean the word tool there stands out. That's exactly how we think about it. So the importance for students when they're using this new tool is that it's just like when you used older tools in the past. So we would still cite that you used it and be transparent with your readers about how you used it and maybe why you chose it or which specific version of it you use, that kind of thing. But you're being transparent about your use, and that aids your readers for if they're going to try to replicate your study later, or just in understanding what it was that you did.
I think continuing with that idea, with both those ideas, is making sure the students understanding which tool is best going to serve them at the stage of the writing process that they're in. I'm seeing somebody say in the chat as well, and this is really relevant, that like there's the idea of different tools that are good for different purposes. And it can't just be that like AI is now the only tool that you will ever use. It's like if you're going to build a house, it's not like you can use only a hammer. That's going to have bad consequences in many circumstances. And so I feel like positioning AI among all of the things people already know and already know how to do is important rather than being like, scratch that, AI has taken over.
Mm. Thank you for that, everyone. Um, I think the next thing that we would like to do, kind of building off of Chelsea's statement of different tools having different uses, is we'd like to talk a little bit about the uses of generative AI. So we'd like to hear from all of you about how you allow your students to use AI in the writing process. This is multi-select, so if you allow your students to use AI for more than one purpose, please let us know. I think it really, there's a really wide array of uses here, from all the way from the beginning of the writing process to the end, right? Generating ideas all the way to getting feedback on their writing. I personally use AI often to get feedback on things that I've written, or potential suggestions to make things more clear. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your responses. Everyone is working so hard to get their responses in. We appreciate it. Let's see what we've got here. Okay. 72% generating ideas, 59% feedback on writing. So it looks like it's pretty well rounded here from beginning to end. I think creating an introduction, not a very popular option. Um, I guess I'd like to ask our panel your thoughts on these results.
The question is coming up of there's a separate question here of
Okay.
like, do you allow it at all?
Yes.
Is
Yep.
a like a separate topic of consideration than what this question is, which is sort of like how do you use it? And
Mm-hmm.
the pattern that I see in the how do you use it that we're looking at here is sort of more like at the edges of the writing process, like the very
Mm-hmm.
beginning when you're like, what do I even want to write about? And maybe at the end when you're thinking, I need to polish this and make sure this is good to go out the door, that those two endpoints seem to have more support. And then things in the middle of the writing process where you're like, I need an introduction, is that's more like really, I think the like Liz has been saying, like that should be the humans who are doing that section of
Mm-hmm.
the job is more the um expectation. That was my read on what just was y'all shared with us.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I did realize when we put the poll up, I was like, we didn't include a no, a no option.
I mean, that's
Liz,
immediate feedback,
yeah.
right, on the creation of this poll, on our writing here that, oh, we missed something. And of course, yes, of course, AI refusal is totally a stance that many people are taking, um, and totally valid. And I think it great to talk about your students with that, right? I would argue that we still need to engage with, like, we can't just pretend it doesn't exist. But we can have those conversations with students. Why are you refusing AI? Why is that important? What do they learn by doing the work themselves, by refusing to engage with these tools or resisting the tools or whatever's the language you want to use around it? Totally appropriate.
Yeah. And I think moving forward, we will mostly assume in this conversation that there is some use or acknowledgement of AI in the writing process and in the classroom. And one of the things that faculty often worry about with students is that they may lose critical thinking skills by relying too heavily on AI in their writing. So the next question for the panel is, how can instructors help students maintain intellectual rigor and develop strong critical thinking while using AI tools responsibly? Liz, would you like to tackle that one first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll try.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, first of all, I would argue that writing is still a strong tool for intellectual rigor and critical thinking, even in the age of AI. Sometimes I'm hearing kind of anecdotally and conversationally from faculty members that they're so frustrated with what feels to them
Hmm.
like overuse or like a wave of AI papers that they just want to throw up their hands and give up and like go back to Scantrons, right? And I would push back against that. I think we can still use AI as a mode of learning in our classes. And so using it as a way to get to critical thinking, right? And so to me, I would say that we could lean into what we know are already best practices in writing pedagogy to help students slow down and encourage that deeper thinking in order to learn, right? And one of the really important ways to do that is emphasize the value of the process itself, the writing process itself, and maybe shifting some of our attention and our time and even points in our class, if that's what we're thinking about, into the process steps because it's such an important step of thinking itself, right? Instead of
Hmm.
emphasizing this beautiful, polished, perfect 20-page paper at the end, how can we help them focus on the actual learning you're doing through the process? So, in my classroom, that means scaffold, building in more scaffolding of assignments. Again, this is a writing best practice, right? Building in drafts and feedback and revision, talking with students about their work as much as possible, building in peer review, that kind of thing. And honestly, it also means for me reducing some of my assignment load in order to do that. I teach a full load. I have, 100 to 150 students a term. And so I'm reducing page lengths, I'm reducing number of assignments, all that kind of stuff, because there is a real labor component, of course. But I want to make more space for the process in each assignment rather than rushing through, which I think puts additional pressure on students to over rely on AI. I think the second piece of the question is about also AI literacy, and that is hard. That is
Hmm.
something I, to be honest, am still figuring out. It's a real challenge because, as we know, AI produces like confident, plausible output. It sounds real. And when I use AI and I ask about things where I'm already an expert, I can make really quick judgments about the content it provides, right? I can say like, oh yeah, this is pretty spot on. This is kind of a superficial answer, or oh, you're missing this piece. I can talk back to it. I can have conversations with it. Students can't instantly evaluate in that way because they don't have the expertise yet, right? And so I think a question I'm thinking about a lot right now is how do we help them build the expertise and the disciplinary judgment if they are using AI as a tool all the time, right? So you can think about that in your own classrooms. You might play around with different things like, I mean, I think there's ways to do this, to play around with it, to get an AI response on a course topic, and then either model for your students or have them do it as an assignment to deepen or nuance or like challenge the output it's provided by using course materials or additional research or something else, right? Kind of push them further than that. I think it could be cool to track the development of their expertise over the course of a term. Have them do that step, maybe evaluate AI output early in the course, and then again at the end of the course and reflect on how their evaluation has changed, right? So just teaching them, modeling and teaching them how to be skeptical and question the robots, basically question that AI output as sometimes useful, but also sometimes lacking or superficial or sanitized or, right? I mean, all those things that come up.
Mhm. Chelsea or Tim, do you have a response to the question on how instructors can help students maintain intellectual rigor and develop strong critical thinking skills in the writing
I will say
process?
one quick thing, just that
Yeah.
I think as a source of feedback, it can be useful if do the writing yourself and then say, hey, what did I miss? You can get that kind of feedback just like you would with a person, while recognizing like it's not as good as a person or maybe not as creative as a person, but you might, it can do the sort of obvious things that and the critical thinking that you would gain from that, doing that repeatedly, would be to start thinking, finding those things yourself, of course.
I would add that something I am noticing, like in talking with lots of instructors, is the importance of talking. Because sometimes you don't know what you think until you're saying it, right? And that's why we have like a classroom environment where you can have conversations and we have group work that supports that. And that the stories that stand out to me are the people who they turn and work, they did it with AI and it looks beautiful, but that if you talk to them about it, they can't engage in like a coherent conversation about the thing that they ostensibly wrote. And so to me, that feels like the thing to investigate is how can you incorporate speech or talking, because like to talk it is that gets your ideas out of your head, because then it's like once you understand what you think, writing it down isn't that hard, but it's like understanding what you think and organizing your thinking is really challenging, especially in complicated topic areas like people are going to be encountering at a university level.
Yeah, absolutely. So once that dialogue is open and we're talking about AI and students are starting to think critically while using it, and potentially using it in their writing process. I know that some departments and institutions are now requiring students to provide their prompts or versions or an AI use statement in every assignment. So the question that has been posed to us is, should instructors require students to disclose AI use, and to what extent? I'm going to turn it over to Tim first because I do know that there is some content that we have written.
Yeah, I mean,
Behind
so
it.
we have shared thoughts on, what so we defer to instructors on what they should or shouldn't do, right? So, but we have, from gathering feedback and from hearing the questions and hearing what people are doing, we wrote a few blog posts, Chelsea Smith and I recently, that outline how to cite the tools you're using, either generally or the specific chat, and different scenarios for when and how you would do that. Um, our general recommendation is to save prompts, and there's also the context of the authors writing for publication versus students writing for a classroom. But in both cases, we would recommend saving the prompts, having those available on request, of course, especially if your instructor asks you to include them, then that's what you should do. But that the prompts are not generally as simple as one prompt that you could put in the reference or in somewhere in the text, but it's a sort of a conversation or an iterative process. So to the extent that a prompt or an example is helpful to the reader, certainly included, but it's not a cut and dried always do it or never do it. And we have other specifics about what does go in the reference on the blog post that I think Samantha is probably sharing in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Liz, do you
Also,
have
I'm
any?
sure I've left some details out. What do you think?
Liz, do you have any advice on including or requiring disclosures or what you do?
I mean, you all are the citation experts in APA, and so you've done some really thoughtful writing and thinking about how to ask students to disclose it. I think this is going to be evolving, right? Like, I just think it's going to be changing as we go. Yeah, I think it's going to be different 5 years from now than it is now as our relationship with AI changes. We think about it as a tool. We don't cite Google searches. I mean, I don't know. I know it's complicated. And it's again an interesting conversation to have with students about why. I had a student ask me last week, why would we cite AI? Because part of the reason we usually cite authors is to give them credit for their ideas, but AI is a machine that doesn't need credit. And I was like, oh, yes, but your own
Mm-hmm.
And
intellectual
then
honesty for one thing. And then what about, I mean, and there's no answer for this. What about all the authors on whose work was used to train the AI data who are not getting cited, right? I mean, it's complicated. It's super complicated. So I appreciate the clear guidelines that APA has been working on and developing and writing. And I think that's a great starting point. And I think we're still developing it and thinking about it.
We
Yeah.
often tell people that, like, in your just citing anything in your paper, if you've cited something, you're showing where the idea came from, and anything you haven't cited, the reader assumes is yours. So citing the AI is still acknowledging that this idea didn't come from me, even though you can't pinpoint, of course, where the AI got that info, but you're still acknowledging that it wasn't yours.
yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
the reference takes it as far as you can go, as it can go, because the point of having a reference is to allow the reader to identify and locate the work so they can say, yep, that's the thing, and then go look at it if they want to. And um, for example, if you're using an AI generative AI that will allow you to save the chat, like that is a case where it creates a retrievable source that you might want to refer to in your paper. But I think the larger question is like, is that the source that you should be citing? Like, it would be better to go cite something that's like written by humans, and we're right back to the human centeredness of it all. Like the circumstances under which I want to be citing the results of an AI are more limited in scope.
Somebody just said in the chat, I thought this is so interesting that if you acknowledge your use of AI in the text of your paper, then it opens it up for your critical source evaluation right there, right? Like you can be critical of the AI output there as part of your paper. So I hadn't considered that before. Actually, that's something I'm going to keep thinking about. I've been talking with students about AI disclosure statements. It's something I've been working on myself as a faculty member, being much more transparent about my own AI use on my syllabus, on my PowerPoints, whatever. Or like, hey, I used AI to generate these examples. It's much easier for me to disclose that because the power differential between me and my students, it's much easier for me to say that than it is for them. I think it's pretty hard to ask them to disclose their own AI use because there's a lot of vulnerability around it. There's so much skepticism and anger and frustration around it. And so that's one thing that I'm thinking about in my own classroom, right? Disclosing it. We can't talk about it if nobody's acknowledging that they're using it, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's not the kind of thing maybe that you would bring up as a source in a paper, although that's super interesting. But what if they're using it for feedback, revisions, generating
Hmm.
ideas, right? Like how do we disclose that use? So again, APA has guidelines on that. but just it's part of the conversation I'm having with students.
And to add on to that, in order to disclose, you must understand and have monitored what you did. And so if you're just kind of not paying attention to your own process, then you get to the end and it's like, I know I read that somewhere, but where did I read it? Like that case of like, and so it's about building processes of documentation and being careful while you research to be like, this is where I got this thing, like, because you want to be able to go back at the end and be like, I'm making an important claim. What do I have to back that up? And if your ultimate resource is that ChatGPT told you it, like, well, where did ChatGPT get that information? And it's not direct, like, it depends on the AI. Sometimes they'll link you to a source, which is great, but like, I would always rather someone go to the human done source to look at the thing because generative AI is by its very nature not consistent, like, because it's a probability machine. And in science, you need it to be the same every time if it's meant to be the same every time.
I was going to say something similar about the trying different things other than ChatGPT without recommending one or the other. When we wrote these blog posts, we tried a bunch, and yeah, some of them are better about giving you the source information, and then you can just go read that, and then make your own evaluation and cite that primary source.
Before we move on, Tim and Chelsea, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything more you wanted to say about citation of AI tools and APA style. And make sure we tackle that before we move on.
I was just gonna say, I think that there is to answer really any question with how am I citing it, should I be citing it, is to think about like, is this helpful to the reader, my citation of it? And what are the expectations of the environment that I'm in? Am I in a classroom environment where I have a professor who says, I want you to write me an AI contribution statement and include that with your paper and explain how you used AI? Then, like, yeah, you better cite it, and here's how you could do it. And if you used it for like, you a specific task and you want to talk about that, cite it. But like the case where it's like AI built into Microsoft Word that's fixing your grammar for you, that you don't cite that because it's in your common software. It's like similar to like using spell check. Like I don't tell you that I use spell check. I just use spell check. Um,
That's great. Thank you, Chelsea. Kind of along those lines, on the levels of AI that we use and um, how they can be used in students' work, we wanted to ask the audience a few questions about AI detection. So we'd like to know if your institution uses AI detection tools, and secondarily, we'd like to know how much you trust AI detection tools, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's AI policing AI. So we thank you so much for all of your responses. Y'all are speedy when it comes to AI detection. We're looking 50-50 on use. Anisha, I think we can probably cut this off at like 45 and share the results. So yeah, looking pretty even on institutions that do and do not use AI detection tools. Very few people completely trust AI detection, which is totally understandable. 62% believe it's a good starting point, but humans need to make the final decision. And kind of along with those results, and the majority of people here not fully trusting AI detection. The question that was submitted to us was how reliable AI detection tools are and how should faculty interpret those results. to avoid penalizing false positives. Liz, do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I think that it sounds to me like everyone has a critical relationship with detection tools, which I think is,
Hmm.
I agree with, right? That's where I'm at too. I absolutely understand the wish for magical, reliable AI tools. I've definitely tried those tools, and again, my own relationship has continued to change. But yeah, it'd be great if there was a tool that did that. But honestly, just like turn it in before AI, when it was a plagiarism detector, I think is problematic. For one, I mean, as people have pointed out here, right, those detection tools have unreliable results. Turnitin itself says that it misses 15% of AI generated content, which doesn't concern me that much. My bigger concern is false positives, as we all
Hmm.
know, right? It's returning false positives. Somebody here in the chat mentioned that they gave it Charles Dickens and it said this is AI generated. I was reading this morning a piece in Ars Technica that somebody fed it the US Constitution. It said that was AI generated, right? Because it's looking at like syntax and repetition of words and language and sophisticated vocabulary, those kind of things. And so we get these higher false positives. Well, first of all, false positives, problem, and then higher rate of false positives for students who are neurodivergent or English language learners because of, again, some patterns of syntax structure and vocabulary and repeated words and that kind of thing. Also, there's the
Hmm.
issue that English language learners might be using Grammarly or other like AI writing tools at higher rate in order to kind of meet the expectations of academic correctness, right? So
Yeah.
that's just a problem. And I think that relying on them too heavily, as it sounds like everybody is aware of, leads to this like what I would say is pretty problematic relationship with students in my classroom. It can lead to false accusations. It can create an adversarial relationship with students, right? It makes me feel like I'm policing instead of teaching. I like I had a real existential crisis about this in the first couple of years of AI because I was like, what is this? This is not the job I want to be doing. It's just like trying to police and manage all my students' work in this way. And so yeah, so I don't use them. I mean, we can talk about other approaches. I don't, but I just don't think there's a magic bullet at this point. I think it has to be like deeper, longer term thinking and development of kind of the classroom environment and other things. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that it can be challenging to respond appropriately when you do think students may be over relying on AI. Do you have any additional advice for what instructors can do in
I
a
mean,
situation?
yeah, I don't have a perfect answer here, but I
Yeah.
do think it's this kind of longer term project of a culture of openness and discussion and
Hmm. Yeah.
curiosity and transparency, right? And setting clear boundaries in your own class about what stages of the process are AI tools appropriate, if any, why, right? I work with your class, talk with them about AI ethics. Have and listen to what they have to say, right? Instead of just telling them what you think. If you've had these conversations with your class, you may find that students are also pretty skeptical and pretty mixed. Like they bring their own perspectives to it. I know a lot of people are doing this now. One thing I found useful is to have that conversation in conjunction with actually asking my students to create a classroom policy around our use of AI ethics, kind of talking through with some like guidance for me, right? But like talking
Hmm.
through different stages of writing. Okay, do you think this is an appropriate use of AI? What do we lose if we use AI for this step? What do we gain? Um, are we still learning if we use AI in the step, right? Like talking through that and having my class develop their own policy and then actually
Hmm.
taking that policy and either posting it on Canvas or inserting it into the syllabus so that there's a real feel of ownership. I found that to be useful. Some faculty members I know are actually asking students, each individual student can create their own AI policy. So it's an interesting approach. But I myself at this point, what I'm doing if I suspect overuse is I'm calling students in and having a conversation with them again, similar to how you used to do with plagiarism. Instead of just saying like, you did it, you're dead. Just like bringing them in and saying like, hey, talk to me about your process. Here are my concerns. like, and having people redo work if needed, but again, creating a culture of disclosure. Now that's complicated. I know that's easier said than done. Again, there's a labor component of how much effort that takes.
Yeah.
I also find the relationship piece of it to be much easier for me when I'm teaching face-to-face classes than when I'm teaching online, because sometimes I email a student 4 times and they don't respond. Then what do I do?
Mhm.
Right? So like, again, not perfect, but I do think it's this kind of longer term, deeper development of that environment and relationship.
Yeah. Chelsea or Tim, do you have any thoughts on addressing potential AI use or, improving transparency with
The
students?
way the way that I'm imagining encountering this question is, how would I know what would be signs that a human wrote it? Like if I showed you a document and you read it, and how would you know that I wrote it? Me in particular. Would it sound like me? And so I'm thinking about, how we're helping students develop as writers, which is to say, we're helping them develop as thinkers who can then put the words down on paper. And I think maybe it ties back to the idea about the importance of talking and like those small group discussions or discussions in class, that your writing should be it should sound like you. It should sound like you're thinking. And I think that there's been a long-standing thing of like your writing has to sound official. It has to sound very scholarly, and you need to substitute synonyms of bigger words in order to sound more official, like that kind of thing. And now we have this tool of AI that's like got all this promise. Every sentence will have the word delve and a handful of M dashes in it, like, and but then it genericizes it. Everything sounds the same that is AI. It's like you go through the social media algorithm and you're just like that AI, like everything's got the same structure, the same pattern of how long the sentences are. And Liz is making a face. What do you think?
Can I say though, Chelsea? Now, I mean,
Yes.
it's just an arms race. So there's the AI
Right?
detectors and then there's AI humanizer tools, right? So students, you can like generate your paper with AI and then run it through a humanizer and then run it through another humanizer and then run it, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's just always going to be an arms race, I feel like. So it is sounding
Right?
less, it doesn't sound as much like AI all the time anymore, which again makes it even harder to detect. And it makes me feel crazy to get too caught up in trying to detect it. I think it's a
Fair.
losing battle. I don't
Fair.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm because it's like why even? But the thing that makes me excited is the idea of encouraging students to develop a voice, to develop the skills to think for themselves and have thoughts, and to be able
Yeah,
to express them without needing a computer to do it for them.
totally. And
Yeah.
I think I'm sorry if I've jumped in here. Andrea, did I speak?
Keep going.
I think it is pushing us, Chelsea, to ask ourselves tough questions as faculty of like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? What are we asking students to do and why? Why do they need to learn to write if AI can generate the stuff for them? What is the value and what is the importance of that? And those are hard questions. Like those are real.
Mhm.
They're hard questions, but I think that's
Totally
part of
agree.
what this is pushing us to do, right? And to think about ourselves and to try to talk to students about it and address those things. What do you get out of this? What does this process do for you? And why is it valuable?
Yeah, I think that leads very directly and nicely into our next topic, which is the development of AI aware assignments that encourage originality and critical thinking, and kind of how do we adjust? We've talked a lot about policy and syllabi and detection, but like on a real practical level, how do instructors create AI aware assignments that acknowledge that students may be using AI, but still kind of give them the same skill development as like a traditional writing assignment would pre-AI, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I think there are things we can do. I've seen a lot of in the chat people talking about like reflection statements and asking students to kind of turn their own metacognitive awareness back on their own use of AI. I think
Hmm.
that's great. I think that's a really useful approach. I would think about developing assignments in two big chunks, kind of adapting assignments to try to reduce reliance on AI and integrating AI into our assignments. If you're open to that, again, not required, just something that some people are interested in. So as far as adapting assignments, I will just start by saying you can't, I don't personally think it's possible to really proof your assignments at this point, right? Like you can't AI proof your assignments. Some people, again, in the chat have talked about using blue books, going back to in-class writing. There's, I mean, that's one approach, and there's challenges to that. But that might be something that works for you. Some people are doing, I've heard of people doing like oral exams. Interesting. So there's ways to shift it that way. But again, some people are teaching online. Some people have a teaching load that makes that approach not functional or possible. And also, to be honest, I feel like part of what I'm trying to do is help students figure out how and when to use or refuse these tools, and how are they going to use them or refuse them outside of my classroom as well. And so to me, I don't know. So that's where I'm at, right? But I absolutely think that we can give some thought to how we adapt our assignments to make them just a little less tempting to generate with AI. So for one thing, as I mentioned earlier, I think reducing page length and extending timelines, I think is useful at this point. Sometimes AI over reliance, again, similar to how plagiarism used to work, comes with because students are anxious, stressed, or overloaded, right? They've pushed themselves to the night before, and now they're stuck in a position where they either have to binge write this whole paper or, oh, look, there's a magic tool that'll do it for me. So any way we can reduce that temptation is good. So building in process steps, topic proposals, drafts, partial drafts, annotated bibliographies, peer review. I think that's all to the good, and different kind of scaffolding in that way. Um, and engaging with their writing, right? Giving them real feedback and human feedback, and having conversation with them that, and like indicating this matters and this is worth doing. I think also we can build in low stakes writing, right? Reduce the pressure on that final big paper, but do multiple smaller things across the term. That can be a good way to reduce that reliance. As far as adapting assignments themselves, one way to think about this is to tap into like personal or local knowledge, tie in students' lived experience. Yes, AI can generate that stuff, but maybe it's less tempting to do it, right? Like if you're asking for students' personal experience with a subject, or shifting from asking questions about national problems to campus problems, right? Bringing it more local and having them interviewing or talking with people on campus, right? That kind of thing, depending on what your subject is, of course, but there might be ways to play around with that. I've also tried, and you could try if you wanted, multimodal or group work. So yeah, I have developed assignments where students, right, to like put together comic strips as a first draft of their paper, or I teach a podcast, like I do podcasts in my class. I've shifted into doing some more like presentations online instead of written papers. Yes, I think they're getting AI support to develop some of those ideas, but at least they have to record, I mean, I think that it makes it a little harder to just fully one and done generate the whole thing. And I do think group work does the same thing. Again, brings its own challenges, but is one approach students can kind of scaffold and work with each other. Um, and then something I want to keep developing more is leaning into authentic assignments and authentic audiences. Again, why are we doing this in the first place? Well, maybe there's a real audience on the other side. Maybe they're going to publish their work, or maybe this is something they're really going to do in their future work, or it's a real research proposal or something else, right? Something authentic in that way. For people who are interested in integrating AI into assignments and writing process, I've started doing some of this in my own courses, in conversation with students about trying out AI for brainstorming, right? Seeing in what ways that's useful and what ways it's not. Playing around with AI to generate counter arguments, right? To like have a little debate with AI and students write rebuttals or respond. Um, I do find AI to be really helpful as a feedback step for students and myself, not to replace peer review, not to replace human review, but as one option. I often give it as an option among several, so that some students are refusing AI and they can make that choice and honor their ethical boundaries. But integrating AI, yeah, having AI as a feedback tool and a reflection component, right? Having a critical reflection component of like, what's good advice? What am I not going to take? Right. Again, kind of practicing those steps. And again, and one area to keep that I think is getting better and is not a perfect system yet, but is starting to try it out for research as well. Again, you can ask for citations, you can ask for scholarly articles. People have mentioned hallucinations with those. Those do happen. I find them to be happening less often. And I think anything that we say AI can't do that, I think it's AI can't do that yet. I think it's getting better. And you know, I don't know. And some of the research tools that you already use, maybe integrating AI as well, like Google Scholar has a beta platform, Google Scholar Labs, that does like a Google Scholar search, but also gives a little AI summary of the articles, 1 or 2 sentence summary. That seems like a pretty great tool for students. So exploring those things. I do think the central goal for any of these changes is, again, keeping students at the center, keeping students doing the critical thinking and the rhetorical judgment and the inquiry that writing can support, that we want them to learn, and using AI as a tool rather than a replacement for that.
Thank you, Liz. I particularly love your suggestion about the authentic assignments, making it a little bit higher stakes personally for them. I think that's great advice. Chelsea and Tim, do you have any thoughts on um, creating AI-aware assignments to help with originality and critical thinking?
I mean, I defer to Liz on all of those great suggestions.
Yeah.
As from an AP style point of view, I mean, the students in the future may be not in your class, but in a later class using it, or in their academic writing and other types of published writing later in their careers, or at work. So getting the experience on how and when to be transparent and how to cite, it may still be a useful task to intentionally build in. I want you to use it so that you can know how to cite it and know when to cite it.
Yeah.
Something
Go
that
ahead,
strikes
Chelsea.
something that strikes me is that, like, obviously this is an evolving thing that's happening to all of us. Like, as we sort of figure out answers as we go, and as whatever changes happen in the future are going to affect that too. I find the idea of being like a student of your own experience to be a really valuable way to figure out how to share things with others in like a teaching capacity. And like the example that was springing to my mind was like trying to like buy a product on like Amazon or a home improvement website. And all the stores have their AI summaries of the customer reviews, and then they have the actual customer reviews. And to me, that is like an example of the good and bad parts about AI, because like the summaries are so generic, and it's like customers loved it except for the ones who hated it. And it's like, and then you kind of read through and you see how personal and different people's perspectives are when it's a human being write it. Like you have someone who's like, I'm a hobbyist woodworker and I know everything about this topic, and they've got this long detailed thing, and you're like, that's their perspective. And somebody who's like, excellent product, haven't opened the box yet, but just I love it. Like it I don't know, I feel like stuff like that is accessing tools that we all have, or like what Liz was talking about how like Google Scholar that anybody could access if it's got AI gone into it. They're like connecting it to things that are in their life that they can keep accessing after they're done with school, after they're out of this class, to just help contextualize where to put AI as a tool for for their own personal use or school use or whatever that use might be.
I love what you said, Chelsea, about being a student of your own experience. That's such a great way to put it. To me, that is like the most exciting part about all this, right? Once I got past the first few waves of grief, and again, it comes and goes. But to me, it's like exciting to get to talk about this stuff with students in like such an authentic way that I am still figuring out, right? Like I've been teaching my writing courses, my lit course, like the stuff I've been teaching it for 15 years. And so, yes, students sometimes say surprising things, but also like I'm pretty familiar with the material. There's kind of this like expert student relationship, like that kind of stuff, right? And I think it's pretty exciting to have something to say like, "Hey, I don't know what to think about this. I'm still figuring it out. Here's what happened when I tried it last night, and now I'm getting a totally different answer." Right? To like model that curiosity and inquiry and exploration in class, like show what that looks like, and for it to be authentic and genuine. I am finding that to be um I don't know, energizing and
Mhm.
exciting in some ways. I think it's good for students to see us be genuinely curious and generally like intellectually skeptical and all that stuff, right? Like bring it to your class. So I have enjoyed that part of it.
Great. We love intellectual curiosity here. So, anything that can get us thinking and questioning is a good thing in my book. There's one more question. I think I've seen it mentioned in the chat, and I wanted to make sure to ask it here, but there's been some discussion of equity and how faculty can help ensure equity in AI use when some students may be using like a premium service and others may not be able to afford it. Just wondering if our panel had any thoughts on that and how we can support students in being equitable in using AI. Liz, do you have any thoughts? Or Chelsea or Tim?
I mean, I again don't have a magical answer here.
Yeah.
It's totally a valid concern, right? And yes, the concern that what is currently available for free is eventually going to cost money absolutely makes sense. There's already, of course, it's like a freemium model, right? Where you can get the free version or you can get a better version that's paid. Totally. Yes, that is a equity issue, right? The access that people have.
Mhm.
On the other side, there's like equity issues in how we accuse or enforce AI misuse. I mean, that is, again, kind of puts at risk students who are using AI tools for reasons of language learning and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's complicated. I don't have a good answer for this. I mean, I, I have the same questions. I think it's something to be aware of and be thinking about, talking about as we go forward. It's a real, an equity gap is real. Yeah.
Yeah. We do have a lot of live Q&A questions. Samantha, I know that you have flagged a couple of these. Is there one or two in particular that you'd like to pose to the panel?
Yes, I've been looking at all of these questions. One that I thought was interesting is Carl asked about prompt engineering frameworks. So what prompt engineering frameworks do you recommend so students can better craft their input to AI? And what frameworks do you recommend for folks to introduce to students so they can better analyze AI output?
Um, if I don't know if Tim or Chelsea has thoughts about this. I again am not a prompt engineering expert. To be honest, I have found in like the way that I'm using AI, I have found prompting, like the specific prompt engineering, to actually be less and less important. I think as the models have advanced and gotten better, I get better answers just with my own natural writing and speaking. So that's not the answer that's not really the question you asked, but that's kind of where I'm at with that, is that I stopped worrying about prompt engineering so much. Now, I probably people who are using it for like data analysis or other things might have other thoughts about that. And there are guidelines out there for sure about like give it a role and tell it who the audience is and that kind of thing. But I have just found it to not be as necessary as it was 6 months ago, right? It just keeps changing.
Yeah, I feel like that's a way of asking how do we ask questions of AI effectively is sort of what is the underlying thing that we're trying to get at. And I can see the merit of different approaches depending on the field and like the level of specialization of your class. Like if you were in a really technical environment, that might be more appropriate.
I think it might also be interesting to look at like the input to AI in the same way as we do like any sort of search strategy, like really paying attention to the words that are used and how you kind
Yeah.
of conduct that search strategy, I think is really interesting. One other question that came up, and I'm asking this because I know we've talked about it a lot, but what about translation using an AI for a translation? Like if you're submitting to an international, like you want your paper to be submitted in a language maybe you don't have 100% command of.
I think we have to go back to the fact that AI is not the author and cannot sign responsibility for your work. Only you can. And so if you're in that kind of situation, you would probably need to look at the policies of the journal and but then ultimately also really making sure that you're responsible for what your work says. Because translation is an art. It's not like there's a one-to-one correspondence of every single word into every language. Not um
Yeah, I was going to say
n-
that too. That it probably varies by policy for journals, but I wanted to say something about the previous question too. The prompt engineering. I'm not at all an expert in any way on prompt engineering, but writing these recent blog posts, we gave the same question to 4 or 5 or 6 different tools, and got very similar answers. But I think that with a different question, you might see a bigger diversity. So I think just a little bit trial and error, but also trying to see which tool is the best fit for the type of maybe research you're doing or the type of task you're trying to accomplish.
I do want to respond to one question that was in Q&A myself. A future webinar on using AI in research might be something to consider. Ed, I think you've read our minds, and it's definitely something we've discussed. So please stay tuned there. Uh, it's definitely something we would like to explore and discuss. Samantha, is there like one more question you wanted to ask, or should we go to parting thoughts?
I think there's a lot of different questions here, and we can definitely recommend. If we haven't answered your questions, you can send them to our email service, which is styleexpert@apa.org. But yeah, Andrew, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice, Samantha. We'll put it in the chat as well, the email address that you can write to. I do want to give my wonderful panelists here just a moment to give parting thoughts on AI and the writing process. Liz, let's go ahead and start with you as our guest.
Okay. I feel like I'm on the spot a little bit. I
Oh,
think
I'm
I'll
so
just reiterate.
sorry.
No, it's fine. I should have seen that coming, of course. Um, I think I'm just going to kind of reiterate a
Yeah,
theme throughout my talk, but just that again, AI is here. I think it's worth engaging with, even if you don't adopt it. You can refuse it, but still be talking to your students about it. And again, my goal is to keep students doing critical thinking and judgment and inquiry. And I think we can do that through writing, even with AI in the world.
yeah. Chelsea?
that was perfect. My thoughts that I feel like emphasizing are I'm going with be a student of your own experience. Because to emphasize that how we are all encountering AI use in writing is each of us is a little bit different, and understanding what your own experience is allows you to share it and then sort of discover and have this conversation and figure out together what will make best practices and better practices. um, and so I feel like that, and encouraging like students to also develop that awareness of what the process of thinking and writing is like so that it becomes more conscious and manageable for them.
Yeah. Tim,
I
any final
guess that
thoughts?
leaves me. I will say
Yeah.
just that we fully agree that it is uh, ongoing and changing, and that the underlying approach, even if maybe the specifics change for us, is about being transparent with your reader and citing your sources.
Yeah, well, thank you so much to our panel for all of your thoughts and insights. And I also want to thank everyone who attended today and participated in the conversation. Y'all have asked such insightful questions. We really appreciate you. Please look for an email from us in the coming days with a link to the recording It will have captions and a chat transcript in case you missed something in the chat. We know it can move quickly. And please look for your attendance certificates. Please give us a little extra time just because of the holidays, and it is a manual process. But we appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here today.